Knowing that her parents would be against her taking this assignment, which carried no little risk, she would do her best to assure them of her safety and convince them that she would stay in touch as much as the situation allowed. This would do very little to ease her mother's anxiety, but it was the best she could offer. Though she was the wife of a retired police officer, and thereby accustomed to fearing for her husband's safety, her mother was cursed with an overactive imagination. Add to that the addiction to mystery novels she had developed as a librarian, her mother was a worrier. To provide her parents with some extra assurance, Samantha would teach them how to use FaceTime on the new phone she'd given them for Christmas. Just the knowledge that her mother could actually see her would probably do much to alleviate the anxiety of having her only daughter in danger. Samantha had a zillion things to take care of before her trip across Alligator Alley this evening. Life was about to change, and she was so over the moon. It was all she could do to contain herself. Smiling, she set about finishing her final day as chief White House correspondent. Chapter 1. 3 years later. On the plane, Samantha took a small powder compact case out of her bag, snapped it open, and glanced at her image. Almost that of a funhouse freak, she thought as she closed the mirror. She'd aged more in the past 3 years than most women did in 10. Her once lustrous blonde hair, now lackluster, hung limply to her shoulders. Dark blue eyes that normally shimmered like sapphires were dull and flat. "There's plenty of reason for the way I look," she observed, tossing the case back in her bag. She had only spent a few weeks as an embedded reporter when the powers that be gave her the new title of Chief Senior International Correspondent. Spending most of her time watching the war and reporting the often devastating news left little time for a social life. But in spite of the war-torn area she'd temporarily called home, love had found its way to her when she'd least expected it, slamming into her heart and soul with as much force as the bombs that fell around her, so much so that they almost became white noise. Almost. And that's what had aged her. The days spent with the soldiers, her sources, the fixers, her driver, and interpreter, searching for the latest stories fit for the evening news, then hurriedly wiping her face with wet wipes, tugging her hair in a ponytail, and swiping on some lipstick to ensure she'd look halfway decent on camera. She would spend about 5 minutes reporting, then slip into her flak jacket, dust off her Blundstone boots, and prepare for a special report if called on. She'd been embedded with the Army for only 6 weeks when she learned of her new assignment. Part of her felt relief, but another part of her was sad to leave the men and women she'd grown so close to in such a short period of time. It was just another aspect of her job, one she didn't like too much, but it is what it is, she'd told herself. Now, here she was on a plane, headed back to the States, back to Florida, to spend Mother's Day with her mom for the first time in 3 years. As planned, she'd kept in close contact with her family through emails, an occasional letter, and FaceTime chats. She'd missed her parents more than she would admit, and hoped they would slip into the familiar ease they'd always shared. More mature than when she'd left 3 years ago, Samantha had witnessed so much violence and sometimes death that it had hardened her. The soft edges of her former self were nothing more than a sweet memory. She smiled, recalling her arrival in Afghanistan. Despite the culture shock, she'd quickly learned the ropes and jumped into her new position as though she'd been doing it her entire life. But it was now time to look to the future, as she had enormous, completely life-changing responsibilities. "Ma'am, you'll need to buckle your seatbelt. We're ready to taxi," a pretty young flight attendant instructed her. Samantha had been so caught up in her thoughts that she hadn't paid attention to what was going on around her. She fastened her seatbelt, then adjusted the belt, securing the infant seat next to her. Caroline was sound asleep. Her daughter, almost 8 months old, was used to travel.